Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia Channel. The book we interpret for you in this program is called Let the Brain Free. This is a popular science book in the field of brain science. The author tells what the brain is like in the book. Organ, how do we take care of it and make good use of it? At the same time, the book also raises some questions worth thinking about, such as, are people who love sports particularly smart? Short-term memory depends on first impressions, so what does long-term memory depend on? How can we free ourselves from unpleasant past experiences? What is the causal relationship between sleep and brain health? Why do men and women think differently? You can get the answer after watching this video. The author is John Medina, a biologist who specializes in the study of the brain. He is also a visiting professor at Seattle University and the University of Washington. He is also a best-selling author and has written many books related to medicine, such as Gene Purgatory and The Physical Age, Depression. His specialty is to express those difficult medical knowledge in plain language, so that ordinary people can understand it. This is pretty amazing. The brain is the most important organ in our body. In theory, every organ in our body can be replaced. For example, if an arm or leg is broken, you can replace it with a fake one. If your heart stops beating, you can also get an electric one. Only if the head is broken, it is really broken, you can't change it. So protecting the brain, caring for it, and taking care of it is one of our most important tasks. Before taking care of it, one thing we need to do first is to understand it. The content of this book is not like other books on the brain, which are all medical terminology that is difficult to remember, such as telencephalon, diencephalon, frontal lobe, and parietal lobe. This book does not talk about these things. Just simply gave us a list of 12 laws. These 12 laws are a summary of the author's many years of research, which can clearly reveal some characteristics of the brain. We may still have a long way to go to fully understand the working principle of the brain, but as long as we understand the working habits of the brain, its temperament, and its hobbies, we can go along with it and do what it likes. Don't do anything to harm it, which is actually enough for those of us who don't do research. Some of these 12 laws are repeated, and for convenience we have combined them into 9. Now let's take a closer look at the 9 laws. First part. Let's first look at what the structure of the brain looks like. The structure of the brain is notoriously complicated. It was not until the First World War that we began to understand this organ slowly, and it took about 100 years. Then why did brain science begin to develop rapidly at that time? Because the First World War was a war called a meat grinder, a large number of soldiers were disabled, and there were a large number of cases and samples. Today the soldier was shot in the head and this part was injured. Tomorrow the soldier was shot in the head and that part was injured. As soon as there were more such samples and more cases for comparison, brain doctors began to gradually understand the structure of the brain. It was not until the Second World War that a large number of cases were shipped over, and brain scientists took this opportunity to draw a complete map of brain structure and function. What we now know is that the adult brain weighs about 1.4 kilograms, 80% of which is blood, and it has about 14 billion brain cells. Every day, whether you use it or not, it will die about 100,000 brain cells, and the less you use it, the more brain cells die. Of course, it will also grow new ones. So it is a particularly diligent organ, it has to keep moving, and it has to find things to do. But you can't let it be overused. If it is overused, it will get tired and it will go on strike. There used to be a view that we only use 10% of our brain capacity in our lifetime, and the rest is wasted. But modern science proves that this concept is wrong. Everyone's brain will be used 100%, and no part is idle. Just like a baby's head, it grows from the size of a palm to the size of a watermelon. The parts that grow out are all newly grown after you have used it and received stimulation. When you need it, it will be activated in time, so there will be no useless and idle brain cells. For the brain, there are 2 favorite elements, one is oxygen and the other is glucose. Glucose provides energy and oxygen takes away the waste produced in the brain. This is all done through blood transport. The brain uses the most glucose of any organ, and you can think of it as a big light bulb with densely packed filaments. And this light bulb consumes a lot of electricity. You can only light up a small part of the filament at a time. If you light up too many areas or take too long, for example, more than 2%, then the power will be lower than that of the light bulb. If you don't, you will feel dizzy. In fact, this is a manifestation of excessive use of the brain. The brain is constantly producing waste when we are awake, and this waste is flushed out of the brain through the bloodstream while you are sleeping. If you don't sleep for a long time, you may experience hallucinations and your brain will go on strike. The structure of the brain can be roughly divided into 3 parts. The innermost layer is called the brainstem, also known as the lizard brain. It is in charge of some of our instinctive activities, such as heartbeat, breathing, fighting, and fleeing. Just like a lizard, it eats and sleeps, eats when it sleeps, and encounters run away when it is in danger. That lizard has no memory, it is all acting on instinct. The brainstem is the innermost layer of the brain. It is small in size, like a crutch. There is a layer covering it outside, called the limbic system, also called the mammalian brain, which is in charge of our emotions and feelings. Only after we have this layer of brain can we have emotions, such as fear and joy. The outermost layer of the brain is the cerebral cortex, which is a unique part of our human beings. It looks a little wrinkled, but when it is unfolded, it is as big as cowhide. It is responsible for language, imagination, memory, these advanced functions unique to human beings. All are shown in this section. This is the most popular theory of 3 brains in one. This model can explain many relatively virtual concepts in psychology. For example, we can collectively call the brainstem and limbic system the subconscious mind, while the cerebral cortex can be called the conscious mind, and they all work independently. Like 2 computers, each running its own, sometimes they cooperate with each other, but sometimes they also fight. For example, you know that you will gain weight after eating this cake, but you just can't help but want to eat it. For example, you know that exercising is good for your health, but you just lie on the sofa and don't want to move. At this time, your cerebral cortex is fighting with your mammalian brain. The second part. After understanding the basic structural knowledge of the brain, we will find that taking good care of the brain is like taking care of 3 particularly naughty children. It is not an easy task. Fortunately, the author listed 12 laws for us. As long as we follow these 12 laws, we can make the brain obedient and let it work comfortably. Number 1, the more you exercise, the smarter you are. Compared with those who were not used to exercising, those who exercised regularly had a significantly higher level of cognitive operation. On this point, the author has done a lot of experiments, that is, let a person who does not like sports lie on the sofa, and then let him do various IQ tests, and after getting a result, let him do regular exercise. After a period of exercise, come back and take the same IQ test. As a result, every time the result showed that his score would improve significantly after doing the exercise. So what is the principle here? In fact, it is very simple. Exercise can allow us to grow new capillaries, and it can also increase the width of blood vessels, so that blood can flow more smoothly, so that we can provide more oxygen and glucose to various organs. Glucose takes away energy, oxygen takes away waste, and various functions of the body, including the natural performance of the brain, will be greatly improved. So if you look at those athletes, such as Stallone, you can see that the blood vessels on his arms are much thicker than ordinary people, and when he exerts himself hard, his veins burst out. It's a bit like building roads. We all know that if you want to get rich, you need to build roads first. The function of exercise is to widen and increase the number of roads to various organs. After the road is built, materials can be transported in and out easily, and this place will naturally be rich. So how much exercise does it take to be effective? The author has shown through a large number of experiments that in fact, it does not need a lot. As long as there are 30 minutes of aerobic exercise twice a week, the function of the brain will run to the best. It should be noted that what is said here is aerobic exercise, not strenuous exercise. Many people can't tell the difference. They think that the faster they run, the better for their health. In fact, you can think about it, if in ancient times, under what circumstances would a person run fast? Would he run desperately when there was a tiger chasing him behind? At that time, he was actually holding his breath, and what he was doing was actually anaerobic exercise, which was actually not good for the brain or muscles. While running fast, one cannot think. So at any time, it is very important to keep the blood flowing. The author suggests that you should go out for a jog twice a week for half an hour each time. If possible, you can get a treadmill in the office and work on it while walking. For example, the author himself has an office, and he puts a computer on the treadmill. It is said that he has developed the ability to type while walking, and the effect is particularly good. If you have the conditions, you can also give it a try. The second is that the brain has been evolving, and each of us has a different brain. The evolution mentioned here refers to the continuous expansion of the cerebral cortex. You can see that our human brain has evolved and developed continuously from the initial brain capacity of only a few grams to our current 1.4 kilograms. How did it expand? In fact, it is through learning. It changes every time we learn a new skill. For example, when you listen to my current audio, your brain is constantly expanding and growing new neurons. In short, any external stimulus will cause structural changes in the brain, and it will continue to evolve without interruption. What will the human brain of the future look like? We don't know now, but what is certain is that the brains of people in the future must be bigger than our current ones. One real experiment is particularly famous. The doctor opened the skull of a man who felt no pain, and then showed the man a picture. As a result, after looking at many photos, the man didn't respond. Finally, when it was changed to a photo of a sexy female star, this person's head burnt lit up. Sexy female star, you know what it means. What does this mean? This shows that there is a group of neurons in the man's head that is related to this female star. He has seen this female star and knows something about this female star, so he has grown neurons about this female star. This also shows that the brain is very sensitive to external stimuli, and its specific structure actually depends on the culture in which each of us lives. In short, any experience, any learning will lead to substantial structural changes in the brain. So from this perspective, everyone's brain is unique. Number 3, the brain does not pay attention to frivolous things. We should all feel this point. It is difficult for us to keep our attention on boring things for a long time. So what is a boring thing? Anything that doesn't evoke emotional ups and downs is boring. So according to what we said earlier, when speaking to others, you are not talking to the cerebral cortex that controls rationality, but the limbic system that controls emotions. The most important purpose is to arouse the emotional response of the other party, which is very important. So how to do this? The author summed up a set of his own teaching methods for us. It is to add bait in sections. The bait is actually any joke, or story that can arouse emotions. These baits should be related to the topic you are talking about. No matter what emotion the bait evokes, whether it's joy, fear, or surprise, it's especially helpful in regaining the audience's attention. For example, for a half-hour speech, when you are preparing in advance, you can add a bait at the 10-minute node, so that every time the audience wants to run, you can pull them back in time, and the speech effect is particularly good. So being able to tell jokes is also a very important ability. The fourth law, short-term memory relies on first impressions, while long-term memory relies on regular repetition. After the information is input into the brain, a very thin wire will grow around the neuron, which is actually short-term memory. If repeated at intervals, the filament will gradually become thicker and harder. It's kind of like cement, it slowly sets in and becomes a long-term memory. For example, if you are asked to recite physics formulas now, you will definitely open your mouth. But when you first learn it, you find it particularly difficult. This is actually a result of the continuous thickening and hardening of neurons. The characteristic of short-term memory is that the stronger the stimulus at the moment of receiving information, the deeper it remembers. The hallmark of long-term memory is that the more you repeat intervals, the deeper the memory becomes. You should have heard of the Ebbinghaus memory curve, right? It's a jagged curve, a memory that you quickly forget if it's not repeated in time. But when your repetition reaches a certain number of times, you can't forget it even if you want to. Another feature of memory is that it can be continuously modified. For example, basically all the people who mentioned that they broke up with their former partners were dumped by others, and few people admitted that they were the one who was dumped. Are they really lying to themselves? Actually, not really. In fact, in order to make himself feel better, the memory will really be revised. When he recalled the afternoon of the breakup, he would really remember that it was the other party who stalked him to get back with him, and then he was ruthlessly rejected by him. This feature is also often used in psychotherapy. For example, a person has been traumatized before and has a knot in his heart that he can't get over, and then a psychologist will hypnotize him and guide him to recall the scene at that time. By describing and changing what happened at that time, and reenacting what happened at that time from a different angle, so that the trauma can really be healed. So from this perspective, changing the past is a common occurrence. The guiding significance of understanding this feature is that if you want to remember a piece of information, interval repetition is very important. For example, if you memorize a word, you didn't repeat it many times like ABCD at that time, which is useless. The best way is to look back at it after a period of time, and then look back at it again after a period of time, so that the effect is the best. Also, if you want to change your previous experience, then use the method of recall to go back to the scene at that time and remake a story for yourself. This is not a method of self-deception, it is actually a very effective method of therapy. It can make you completely free from unpleasant past experiences. The fifth law, sleep well, the brain can turn fast. Sleep is the best repair method for the brain, and lack of sleep can damage a person's attention, execution, and working memory. It can be said that if you can't sleep well, then basically you can't do anything well. This has a strong causal relationship. What happens in our brains when we sleep? There are two versions here. The first theory is that the volume of the brain will shrink a little during sleep, and then the blood will flow out of the brain along the outer cortex to take out the garbage produced during the day. That is to say, when you sleep, your brain is actually cleaning up garbage. The second is that although the body is resting during sleep, the brain is not idle. It will replay the things it saw and thought during the day, and it will play it over and over again, sometimes as many as thousands of times. So if you really can't figure out any difficult problems during the day, it's best to let go and go to sleep, and you may understand it all at once after sleeping. Sleeping is also the best time for inspiration to appear. Many novelists create while sleeping. Before going to bed, put a notebook and a pen next to the pillow, and start writing as soon as I wake up in the morning. What is written at this time is often the kind of unrestrained and unconstrained style, super imaginative. Like Mendeleev, who discovered the periodic table of elements, he discovered the laws of the periodic table when he was sleeping, and finally listed this particularly famous table. There are countless examples like this, and many people are inspired when they are sleeping. So how much sleep is considered a standard? There's actually no right answer to this. Some people say it is 8 hours, but it is not at all. This depends on the specific situation. For example, a baby needs to sleep more than 20 hours a day. Adolescent children need to sleep for more than 12 hours. For an adult, he may only need to sleep for 5 or 6 hours. This is actually determined according to the specific age group of the person, and there is no clear regulation. But there is a rule that is the same for all people, that is, taking a nap at noon is especially helpful for rejuvenating the brain. For example, after lunch, as long as you take a nap for 20 minutes, you will be very energetic all afternoon. If you get past that particularly sleepy period, you'll probably be battling fatigue all afternoon. So make sure you get enough sleep, take a nap when you doze off, and don't force yourself. This will have an immediate effect on the brain. Number 6, stress can damage our brains. We often say that we feel too stressed. So let's first understand what is stress. Stress is actually adrenaline. For example, if you are walking on the road and suddenly a hungry dog chases you, your adrenaline must be secreted rapidly, and the first reaction is to turn around and run. Then when you avoid this hungry dog, you will secrete another substance, cortisol, to neutralize the adrenaline, and then your tension will quickly disappear. At this time, you will breathe a sigh of relief, and the stress will disappear at this time. So why do you usually feel stressed? Because in normal work and family, if you encounter something you don't like or hate, you have to do it yourself, and you can't control it. At this time, the adrenaline will always remain at a high level, and it will not retreat. Go down. This state is actually entering a chronic emergency state, and you will feel a lot of continuous pressure. There is actually no obvious indicator of stress. Sometimes you may just feel unhappy, but you don't know why. So how do you know if you are stressed? Here are two standards you can compare. The first criterion is that the stress has caused you to have a physiological reaction, and your emotions about it have been perceived by people around you. For example, if the leader asks you to write a work summary, you really hate this person, and when you think about it, you get angry, you don't want to write it, and you feel bad instantly. At this time, the people around you also feel that this person is different all of a sudden, and all of a sudden he is not good. If you make other people feel your emotional changes, then you probably meet the first indicator. The second indicator is that you have no way to control the source of this stress. Even if you don't want to write 1,000,000 times, but the leader insists you write, you can't help it. If you meet both of these conditions, then you are under chronic stress. Pressure has a critical point. If it does not exceed this critical point, a little pressure can actually give people continuous motivation, and it does no harm. But beyond that threshold, under prolonged stress, it can be a disaster for our brains. Stress can seriously damage the cognitive system, lower the immune system, impair learning ability, and make a person feel helpless for a long time, which will slowly evolve into depression. The source of stress for many people is not actually work, it actually comes from family, more from the expectations of others. There is a book called Silent Confession, which tells the story of how a parent's high expectations drove a child to death. It is quite tragic, and friends who are interested can read it. In fact, this kind of high expectation is very common. It will not help a child's growth, it will only hinder it. So if you feel pressure yourself, you must learn to adjust in time, learn to relax yourself, and let yourself escape from the state in time to get rid of the pressure. If you continue to put pressure on others, then you have to reflect on it. Long-term pressure on others can have disastrous consequences for others. The seventh law is called multisensory use. Our brains are characterized by the parallel cooperation of multiple senses. That is, sight, hearing, smell, touch. If all the senses are superimposed and stimulate you at the same time, then your memory must be the deepest. Here we mainly talk about two senses, sight and smell. Vision is one of our most beneficial senses. It takes up half of our brain resources, and it is the only tool we have to learn any skill. For example, when we read text, we are actually looking at pictures. A small text is a small picture, and finally forms a big picture in our mind. So for the brain, words do not exist at all, and all meanings will eventually be converted into images. Therefore, the author believes that the current teaching method seriously ignores the role of vision, and still spends a lot of time on expressing in words, which is a serious waste of students' cognitive resources. The author advocates that every teacher should learn multimedia teaching methods, and teachers should learn how to make animations to directly convert content into understandable images. In short, in the words of the author, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Another important sense is the sense of smell, which is also an important sensory channel that is often overlooked. Its function is to quickly evoke memory. For example, if you memorize a series of numbers in an environment with rose fragrance, after a while, as long as you smell the fragrance again, you will soon remember this number. This feature can be widely used in business. For example, each store should find its own flavor, and the coffee shop should let the aroma of coffee radiate. Fragrance is a huge help in evoking memory. So from this perspective, the current business environment has a lot of room for improvement. In short, the brain likes the world of multiple senses. If conditions permit, the more stimulation channels are given to a person, the deeper the person's impression of a thing will be. Eighth point, gender differences. There are many differences between men and women. For example, when women speak, the left and right brains are often used together, while men usually only use one side. There are thick nerve fibers connecting the left and right brains of women, while the nerve fibers of men are relatively thin. Women's language expression systems are generally more developed than men's. For example, girls communicate with each other. They have a characteristic, that is, their bodies are usually very close, and then they make eye contact. They talk a lot between them, and use super high language skills to consolidate their relationship. As for boys, they seldom talk. Among boys, they like to strengthen their relationship by doing things together. They like playing games together most. When cooperating, girls like to discuss one thing together, and most of the time they reach cooperation through communication. Among the boys, they like to use commands to achieve cooperation. For example, a girl asks another girl, "Are you thirsty?" The other party probably knew that the girl who asked wanted me to accompany her to buy water. So if the girl asks a boy, "Are you thirsty?" the boy will probably say, "I am not thirsty." You see, a man is more direct, he thinks in a straight line. Therefore, the general EQ of men is not as high as that of women. After understanding these characteristics, we can make a good distinction between the characteristics of men and women. For example, women are more suitable for communication work, while men are more suitable for decision-making work. The 9th law, the brain is a born adventurer. Studies have shown that certain areas of the adult brain can remain as plastic as children do, growing new neurons and making new connections. In other words, we can be lifelong learners, and all these drives are actually curiosity. Every tiny progress of our human beings is the product of curiosity, which is a desire to understand unknown knowledge. When the author was working in Washington, he often visited those old scientists and visited their offices. It was found that although these old scientists are all in their 70s or 80s, their mental outlook, their agility of thinking, their curiosity about unknown things, and their sense of expectation are exactly the same as those of boys in their 20s. Yes, not like an old man at all. They all have their own studios, and they are constantly experimenting and exploring in their own fields. There are many people who have written their wills, and then designed the experiments they will do many years after their death. They are a group of people who have reached the extreme in the use and development of their brains. The characteristic of the brain is that the more it is used, the more flexible it becomes. We must grasp this feature and give it new stimulation in a timely manner, so that it will continue to evolve. Now, let's recap. The author of this book lists 12 laws of the brain for us, and reveals some characteristics of the brain, some tempers and dispositions. The purpose is to let us treat the brain well and not do things that hurt it. On the basis of understanding it, conform to it and give full play to its potential. The 12 laws are that the more you exercise, the smarter you are. Everyone's brain is different. They are constantly growing and evolving. The brain does not pay attention to boring things. Some characteristics of short-term memory and long-term memory. Sleep well. It will run fast, and it will damage the brain under pressure. The brain also likes multiple senses. There are differences between the brains of men and women. Last but not least, the brain is a born adventurer. In fact, we have been weaving a three-dimensional net for the brain since we were young. Everyone's net is similar when we are born, but this net will become completely different at the last moment. Of course, you can also choose not to make it up and let it be taken away by others. But since everyone only gets one chance, why don't we take the initiative to make it beautiful? Am I right? This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.